الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة العالمين سيدنا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا قائد الغر المحجلين وشفيع المذنبين وسيد ولد الآدم ولا فخر محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته وانتهج نهجه إلى يوم الدين. تركنا المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك. So, alhamdulillah, we resume our class, our sessions entitled The Journey is the Destination, the way of the Arifin, the way of the knowers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we could have also called it the way of the Muhibbin, the way of the lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we could have also called it the way of Alladhina Un'ama alayhim, the ones who have been blessed and bestowed before us, taking our cue from Surah Al-Fatiha when we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, sirat alladhina an'amta alayhim. Give us a straight path, the path of those that you have blessed. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who are blessed both in this life and in the next, and the ones that avoid the fitan, ma dhahara minha wa ma batan, and the trials and tribulations, both outward, manifest, and hidden. So we are referencing a particular text called Qutb al-Arifin, the guiding pole of the knowers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are in midst of a section entitled At-Tahdhib wal-Riyada, so spiritual refinement and spiritual discipline. And we were looking at the different adab, the different etiquettes and comportments that are done with the three major relationships or aspects of our lives, namely with our own selves, al-adab ma'al-nafs, which we read already, and then al-adab ma'al-khalq, and the adab or the comportment with the creation, which we're in the midst of, and then after that we will look at al-adab ma'al-haqq, and then the adab with the haqq, with the real, with the true, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, if you may recall from our previous session, we had stopped and indicated here in the text about the character traits of the ulama of the akhirah, or the ulama of basira, or the ulama of ma'rifah. So the scholars, both outwardly and inwardly, that had certain attributes. And then what Al-Laja is going to do is recount for us the attributes of what he calls Jahl al-Qalb. So Jahl al-Qalb means the ignorance of the heart. And I take this to mean, I understand it, obviously it does indicate a type of ignorance, but not necessarily an intellectual ignorance. We would call it a spiritual ignorance. And probably the thing that's closest to what people associate with that today, at least from the secular world, would be emotional intelligence. So I think there's also something that is overlooked, which he's going to talk about here, which encompasses emotional intelligence. Let's call it spiritual intelligence. So spiritual ignorance then would be the attributes that he's going to talk about here. Because he said there's two groups of people that we can follow. We can follow the people maybe outwardly, they have ilm al-lisan, who are eloquent of speech, but may not necessarily have the eloquence of the heart or the intellectual wherewithal of the heart. And we also live in an age today where people may be easily influenced and swayed, not even by what would have been great rhetorical speech in the past, but you know, we have this whole industry of influencers and celebrity influencers, and kind of by, let's call it, people are influenced by the spectacle of it all, right? So we are taken in by spectacle today. And we may attribute this to what another author has called Ujmat al-Qulub. And the Ujma of the Qulub would be like illiteracy of the heart. So we can't even read correctly what is true knowledge, even what sounds like true knowledge, but we can tend to follow the spectacle of it all. And again, we would return all of that back to a type of spiritual malady. So, for those of you who are following the book, this is page 80, and we're going to look at kind of a little bit down, halfway down the page, where we left off last time. And he says, رضي الله عنه ونفعلنا بعلوم في الدارين آمين وعنكم ومن شروط جهل القلب الرغبة في الدنيا والتكالب عليها والاستكثار من جمعها واستغراق القلب في تدبيرها وانصراف الهمة إليها. So from amongst the signs, he calls it shurut, and I don't think he means shurut as in conditions, he means more like ashrat, so it would mean like a sign of jahl al-qalbi, of the ignorance of the heart. He says, ar-raghbatu fi dunya, the desiring of the dunya. And we define dunya many times. Dunya doesn't mean the contemporary world per se. It doesn't mean living in modern times, that type of dunya, or being, living in a city or in a suburb or wherever you may live. That, not necessarily that dunya, but the dunya that is the temptation of the hearts. Things that we compete and vie with one another in terms of accumulation, right? And the Quran describes it as التكاثر, right? Accumulation. في الأموال والأولاد, right? In material accumulation and al-mubaha, and not necessarily having many children, but seeing one's progeny and seeing one's things almost as kind of a way to be proud and to raise oneself amongst others. In other words, to arrogate oneself. These are all aspects of the dunya. So he said, from amongst those signs, الرغبة في الدنيا, to be seeking the dunya, to be desirous of it. والتكالب عليها. Takalub means literally like falling on top of it, throwing everything you got in terms of your spiritual and your emotional energy, everything towards the dunya. والاستكثار من جمعها, right? And accumulating as much as you can. And for many people, it's not even about, people today who have more than what they need and more than what they can ever spend, let's say, in even, 5 lifetimes, let alone one. If you have anything that's in the multi-millions, and certainly there are many billionaires, you don't spend that type of money in your lifetime. It's not actually possible to do that. So it's not then about how I'm going to spend all of this. Then there is a type of temptation in the accumulation itself. There is a type of sort of nashwa or euphoria that comes in just accumulating it, and it's a dark euphoria. It's not one of light. It's one of darkness, and it appeals to the lowest common denominator in the human being. واستغراق القلب في تدبيرها, right? And this is what I just mentioned. استغراق القلب. So putting the heart and everything you got into planning for it and trying to accumulate it. وانصراف الهمة إليها, right? And all your aspiration is just towards the dunya. ومن شروط جهل القلب العالم. So here now he's talking specifically about someone outwardly has knowledge or looks like a talabat ilm, or someone who is a committed Muslim or a committed religious person. They also can have this jahl al-qalb. They can also have this lack of spiritual intelligence, even though outwardly they may be very eloquent and they may يتكلمون في المحافل, and they speak in occasions and they have their own YouTube channel. May Allah not make us of that. So they also can have this. So he says, ومن شروط جهل القلب العالم الغيرة على العلم واستجلاب الحيل التي تظهر جاهه عند الخلق من أجلها مثل كثرة الكلام بالعلم على وجه استجلاب الجاه والشرف مع صحبة فساد النية وخبث السريرة. So here very specifically he said, so they have الغيرة على العلم, right? In other words, there is i'tizaz, or they put knowledge, it's important, and they put it in its place. However, istijlab al-hiyal, right? Istijlab al-hiyal means seeking the means even if they are hila. Generally in Arabic, it's not a neutral term. It has a little bit of a negative connotation to it. Sometimes it's translated as like loophole or plotting or machination or a way to get something done. So istijlab al-hiyal here means seeking whatever means التي تظهر جاهه, that will manifest this person's prestige and status. With whom? With al-khalq, with people. So just seeking status and prestige, seeking, oh, I have X number of followers, or these number of people are my students, and I've gotten X number of people to repent, and so forth. So there's a type of status and prestige that comes along with that. So to idhar al-ilm, so to speak, so that you can gather more of that. مثل, and he says an example, مثل كثرة الكلام بالعلم, like speaking a lot and showing how smart you are and how intellectual you are and how many hadith you've memorized and so forth, and kind of, not so that you can share knowledge with people, but here the reason is wajhi istijlab al-jah, but seeking prestige and status, and people to laud you and to honor you, accompanied by ma صحبة فساد النية وخبث السريرة, and also with a bad intention, a corrupt intention. In other words, istimalat al-qulub. This is a term you'll find a lot, istimalat al-qulub. So mayl al-qulub means hearts turning towards you. Istimala means talb mayl al-qulub. So seeking hearts to turn towards you. And it's easy to justify that. Say, well, no, I'm not inviting to me, I'm inviting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it happens that they see me as the conduit or as a thing, then so be it, and so forth. And it's an easy justification to make. However, في صميم قلبك, in the recesses of your heart, you know that you are seeking people's attention and you like it. And it is mizan daqiq, as they say. Mizan daqiq, it is a very fine scale, and it's easy to fall on that side of it. It's not difficult. So صحبة فساد النية وخبث السريرة, right? And also the khubth, which is the impurity of the sarira, which is the internal state. So outwardly, Shaykh al-Islam, and everybody's talking about you and sharing your tweets and all that sort of thing. But inside as-sarira, مش تمام, right? Inside your internal state is not reflective of what people think is your outward state. وقد كان من مضى من السلف الصالح إذا اشتهى الكلام بالعلم أمسك عن الكلام به حذرا من دقائق العلل المشينة للنية والصدق والإخلاص. وإذا لم يشتهي الكلام بالعلم تكلم به لأن الحرص على الكلام بالعلم دليل على خيانة النفس وخبث السريرة، لأن الكلام بالعلم لا يخلو من وجهين، إما أن يكون سالما من سوء الاعتقاد ودقائق العلل الشانئة للعلم، وإما أن يكون مبنيا على قاعدة معتلة مشوبة بحب استجلاب قلوب الناس واستمالة وجوههم نحو المتكلم، طلبا منه لحب الجاه والشرف وعلو المنزلة. وهذان الوجهان مضطردان في جميع الأعمال، لأن العمل شبه بضاعة حملها رجل في طريق مفازة ذات لصوص وعاهات، فإن لم يكن لحاملها سلاح يذود به عن بضاعته وإلا سبيت بضاعته عنه. يعني, we'll take it a little bit by little. So he said, وَقَدْ كَانَ مَنْ مَضَى مِنَ السَّلَفِ الصَّالِحِ. So from our righteous predecessors, if they sought to speak about knowledge, أَمْسَكَ, they were hesitant, أَمْسَكَ, يعني they refrained from doing so. حذرا من دقائق العلل المشينة للنية والصدق والإخلاص. Why would they not speak? Shouldn't they share knowledge? But they had something else also they were thinking about at the same time, which is important. حذرا, they were careful about what he calls here دقائق العلل, right, which are the finer points or shortcomings or failings that will affect your intention when you are speaking, when you are trying to share something with people. So, and I would expand this to also sharing in general. We live in a time period, an age where everyone likes to share, right? We share things, and sometimes we have to question ourselves. Not sometimes, but definitely, I think most of the time. Why are we sharing? What is the expected outcome? What type of benefit do we seek to get from that? If by sharing you're seeking some personal benefit for yourself, then you have to think once, twice, and three times why you're doing that. or if by sharing you are seeking to bring a benefit to somebody else, then also look at the underlying motivation. So when he calls here دقائق العلل المشينة للنية, so the underlying motivations, the underlying corrupting aspects of why you're doing something that will corrupt your intention and your sincerity, right? And your trustworthiness. These are things to look for, or your honesty, things that they were careful about, as-salaf as-salih. So they would have what we would call mabda ittiham al-nafs. They would forever be accusatory of their own ego, right? They wouldn't say, no, I don't have any more ego, that's not the thing, I'm done with that. Whatever I do is going to be lillah, it's going to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, they look at and they have, wait a minute, my ego is here somewhere. And we've said in other classes, I think in Fath al-Rabbani, that the Arifun, it's not like they completely eliminate their ego, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lends them an ear so that they know when it's speaking to them, and they're able to identify it and able to reject it then and reject its whisperings and its machinations and so forth. So that was the criteria that they had. And then he says here, وَإِذَا لَمْ يَشْتَهِ الْكَلَامِ بِالْعِلْمِ تَكَلَّمَ بِهِ. And if he finds within himself or herself that they're not desirous of speaking, they don't really want to speak, like sincerely, truly don't want to speak, they would rather someone else do it, تَكَلَّمْ, then they speak, right? Because now they know that's a sign that it's not for their ego, it's not for their nafs, it's for something else. لأن الحرص على الكلام بالعلم دليل على خيانة النفس وخبث السريرة. Because if you're the one who always wants to be the star of the show and at the center of attention, and you want to be the one speaking, and you want the people to listen to you, and you want all of that sort of thing, هذا دليل, it's an indication على خيانة النفس, right? That the treachery of the nafs, it's tricked you. وخبث السريرة, and the impurity of the inner state. لأن الكلام بالعلم لا يخلو من وجهين. Because if you're going to speak with knowledge or about knowledge, one of two things. إما أن يكون سالما من سوء الاعتقاد ودقائق العلم الشائنة للعلم. Either it's going to be safe, right, سالما, or protected from سوء الاعتقاد, from bad intentions and bad reasons and bad beliefs about it, ودقائق العلل, and these subtle shortcomings that we talked about that can impugn the knowledge that you're trying to transfer. And incidentally, it's also a well-known, and I say well-spoken about concept within this knowledge of spiritual purification or tasawwuf, that ما يخرج من القلب يصل إلى القلب, as Ibn Atta says. That which leaves the heart, began in the heart, in other words, true, it's sincere, will reach other hearts. And that which does not go beyond, does not originate from except the throat, does not go beyond the ears. So if it's backed by sincerity, even if it's not that eloquent, and it's not that charismatic, and it's not all of those things, then inshallah, سيكون هناك وقعة, right? It will find its place in the hearts of the sincere people. It may not affect the hearts of the people who maybe are not looking for sincerity. Maybe they're just looking for, something that is spectacle, as we said. So if your aura, your presentation is not one of spectacle, you may not find a lot of followers, you may not find a lot of people interested, you may not find any of those things. But inshallah, if it is about sincerity and about al-haqq and the truth and bringing that to people, then even if it's a few people, but you will connect the sincere heart one with the other. So that's one, he said, يخلو من وجهين, لا يخلو من وجهين. So that kalam could be sincere like that. Or وإما أن يكون مبنيا على قاعدة معتلة مشوبة بحب استجلاب قلوب الناس واستقبال وجوههم نحو المتكلم. Or it can be predicated upon a foundation that is shaky, right? That is corrupted by the love of bringing people's hearts towards you and of gaining prestige and of status and so forth with them, towards the person who's talking. طلبا منه لحب الجاه والشرف وعلو المنزلة, right? You want to have this علو المنزلة, you want to be seen as a high rank amongst people, you want people to say that you're from أهل العلم, from the people of knowledge and the scholars and all that sort of thing. And if you have that love of that in your heart, then the kalam, then the speech that you're saying is going to be against you and not for you. وهذان الوجهان مضطردان في جميع الأعمال. And also, these two particular aspects, either sincere or love of dunya and prestige, مضطردان في جميع الأعمال. In all things you'll find that, not just speech. لأن العمل, because your deed, شبه بضاعة حملها رجل في طريق مفازة ذات لصوص وآحات. So he draws the example, the parable of your deeds, and because your speech is a deed, technically, right? Because you're going, سوف تحاسب عليها. Whatever you say, there's going to be a reckoning for it. So, he compares it to a bida'a, like someone's carrying their wares, merchandise, whatever it might be, things that they're going to, that are valuable. Let's call it valuables. You're carrying your valuables. في طريق مفازة, right? In Mafaza back then, it was a big risk to go from one town to the next, because it's like, here's a town and then all this desert or empty space, you know, no patrols, no police, no nothing. You're kind of on your own, and then the next town. So it's risky. So what do you have to do when you do something like that? So when you're carrying your valuables and there's thieves and there's ahat and other dangers around, فَلَمْ يَكُنْ لِحَامِلِهَا السِّلَاحِ يَذُودُ بِهِ عَنْ بِضَاعَتِهِ وَإِلَّا سُبِيَتْ بِضَاعَتُهُ عَنْهُ. So you got to arm yourself. You got to protect yourself. So if you don't have anything by which to protect yourself while you're out in the open and vulnerable, then your things are going to be taken away from you. Your valuables will be taken away. So similarly, he says here, لعمرك لقد تتعلق الصعوبات بسلامة البضاعة المحمولة في طريق المخاوف ولو كان لحاملها سلاح يذود به عن بضاعته فكيف بمن يهمل بضاعته وليس له سلاح يذود به اللصوص في المفاوز. He says لعمرك, by your life, لقد تتعلق الصعوبات بسلامة البضاعة. Right? So the difficult things that we encounter in life, they're going to be connected with the safety, the salama of these valuables. In other words, who you are, the deeds that you do, the things that you say, that you're carrying with you towards your akhirah. Right? في طريق المخاوف. You don't know what you're going to find. ولو كان لحاملها سلاح يذود به عن بضاعته. And this is true even if you have protection to protect your valuables. فكيف بمن يهمل بضاعته وليس له سلاح. So what of the person who doesn't even seek protection, who doesn't even seek protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لم يستعذ من الشيطان الرجيم, and doesn't يفحص يعني دقائق النية والعلل. You don't even have an introspection about these hidden dangers in terms of your intention and your sincerity. Take a protection for yourself. What about someone who doesn't care about any of those things? Then they'll even be in worse shape, right? And this is all, he says, from the signs of jahl al-qalbi, right? Spiritual illiteracy or spiritual ignorance. وَمِن شُرُوطِ جَهْلِ الْقَلْبِ الْعَالِمِ. Also, this refers to people who are seen as people of knowledge. خوف شدائد السنين الآتيات وصرف الهمة إلى الاستعداد لها قبل مجيئها بمصاحبة الاضطراب والطيش وفقد الطمأنينة بالقسمة السابقة في الأزل. ومن اتصف بهذه الصفة فقد انسلخ من العبودية ونازع الربوبية. يا لطيف. So also amongst the signs, especially of people who are religious committed or seen as people of knowledge, خوف الشدائد السنين الآتيات. So irrational fear of the coming future, of the years. He says here, the years that are coming ahead, and spending all of one's himma, right, all of one's spiritual energy and time to preparing for it before it even comes. Be musahabat, so at the same time. So preparing for the future is nothing wrong with that, right? نصف المعيشة التدبير أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that half of getting on with your life is to prepare for things, but be musahabat, but at the same time al-ittirab, right? Ittirab means anxiety, wattish, right? And maybe irascibility and back and forth, insan tayish, like instability is a better word I'm looking for. وفقد الطمأنينة, right? And lack of serenity and tranquility. With what? بالقسمة السابقة في الأزل. Remember we studied the Aqidah section in the beginning. Don't we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His knowledge is qadim, that Allah is omniscient, and His knowledge is pre-eternal, just like He is, because that's how we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so all that is meant to be for you has already been determined for you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So have confidence, have tuma'nina, have tranquility in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has determined will reach you, no matter what you do. Imta, mata, fil azal. Right, here's that word al-azal again. In the time before time, when there was no time. ومن اتصف بهذه الصفة فقد انسلخ من العبودية ونازع الربوبية. Ya Latif. And whoever has this particular attribute, انسلخ. Right, انسلخ means has slipped out. You know, like the snake that slips out of its skin when it sheds it. Has slipped out from ubudiyya, from true servitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَنَازَعَ الرُّبُوبِيَّةِ, and has challenged or has been, let's say, objecting to the rububiyyah, to the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you don't have a confidence, you don't have a tuma'nina in His qismah, الذي سبق في الأزل, التي سبقت في الأزل. You don't have a confidence in that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take care of you, and He has promised that He's going to take care of you, but yet His promise is not good enough for you. So you still feel the need to do other things. So that means, do you not trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you not have true tawakkul? Do you not have tafweed? هل فوت أمرك إلى الله وأفوض أمري إلى الله إنه بصير بالعباد. Does the Quran not say that? And does the Prophet ﷺ does not say that? That Allah is ever vigilant of us and that we put all our trust in Him. So when it comes down to, especially in things that there's a lack of certainty, you know, one of the things human beings want, we want certainty about things. We want to know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow in an exact way and how it's going to be planned out, and we want things to go according to plan. And we don't like when things don't go according to plan. We don't like things when things deviate from what we think the plan should have been or how it should have been carried out. But فوق كل ذي علم عليم. الله يشاء نحن نشاء الله يشاء والله يفعل ما يشاء. We can want things and Allah wants things, but whatever's Allah wants is the one that's going to happen. And so the concept then of at-tawakkul wa tafweed. Tawakkul means put your agency in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa tafweed means don't even have an expectation about the outcome. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala determine the outcomes, and so you're not invested in a particular outcome, you're only invested in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why some of them said that tafweed a'la min at-tawakkul, or tafweed a'la at-tawakkul. So tafweed then, when you don't have an investment in the outcome, is a higher form of tawakkul. It's a higher form of relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because if I'm just mutawakkil, I say, okay, I tied my camel, I did everything I'm supposed to do now, hopefully the outcome will be the way I want it. هذا يسمى توكل وهذا جيد. That's something good, it's praiseworthy. ولكن أعلى منه, but higher than it, is tafweed, where you don't even have a particular connection, a ta'alluq, right, or investment in a particular outcome. So you see the steps that you took to achieve the outcome, that is the outcome. That is your outcome. I did the steps I'm supposed to do, whatever happens after that, up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ومن شروط جهل القلب العالم أيضا عدم معرفة خساسة حاله وقبح ما هو عليه مقيم مع ترك الإقلاع، وهي صفة أموات الأحياء وعوائد أهل الإصرار وسير أراذل الغافلين. And the last one he mentions here about shurut jahl al-qalb, about the signs of the spiritual illiteracy, especially against that, amongst the ulama, or the people outwardly who seem to be people of ilm. عدم معرفة خساسة حاله, not knowing the khasasa, not knowing the despicable or lower nature of your state, right? Always seeing yourself as something always sincere, always trustworthy, always honest, not having that introspection. وَقُبْحُ مَا هُوَ عَلَيْهِ, right? And the ugliness of the things that you may be doing. مُقِيمٌ مَا تَرْقِ الْإِقْلَاعِ. So you're doing them and you don't have this intention for iqla'. You don't have this intention to leave it. So you still do those things that are ugly, right? And some of those things you do that are ugly could be inward and can be outward. So al-ihtiqar wal-izdira', these are ugliness. It's ugliness within the heart. Ihtiqar means to belittle others in your heart. Izdira', to think less of them, to think that you're better than them, to think that that you're a better Muslim than they are, and a more committed Muslim and a more sincere person. You know, the truly sincere person doesn't think about other people's sincerity. It's not thinking, am I more sincere than this person or that person. هو مستغرق في الهيبة, right? مستغرق في المشاهدة. They are all in, as it were, all encompassed in the mushahada, in the witnessing of their Lord in all things. So they don't have time, spiritual time and spiritual energy to think about, is this person better than me or more sincere, or what are they doing? كل هذا من القيل والقال. All of that is from he said and she said and they did and I didn't do and all this sort of thing. They don't have time for that, because it's من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعني. From the good Islam of the person is to leave that which does not concern you. So you're not going to be asked about your neighbor's sincerity or this person's sincerity or what did they do. And you're only going to be asked about yourself. That's where the reckoning is going to come in. Then he moves on and he leaves that jahl al-qalb. He talks about something else. ويتفرع من الأدب مع الخلق أيضا ترك الاستكبار عليهم مع إزالة الاحتقار والازدراء. This is what we just mentioned, subhanAllah. وقبول الحق من الشريف والدنيء منهم ووضوع النفس مع الخلق في الحق في كفة واحدة وهي درجة يرقى العبد إليها عقبة صعبة المرتقى لا تثبت عليها قدم لمن لم تثبت عظمة الله وخشيته في قلبه. So the last thing in this section, so also from the adab with the khalq, the etiquette with the khalq, is ترك الاستكبار عليهم, not to arrogate oneself above them, مع إزالة الاحتقار والازدراء, right? And those are maladies of the heart. احتقار, belittling people, ازدراء, to look down upon them. That's a type of istikbar, even if you don't say anything, even if you don't say that necessarily something that indicates that you're better than they are. But it begins with إزالة الاحتقار والازدراء. So to remove, right, what's called تخلية, to take out these bad character traits, these vices, one of them being belittling of others, الازدراء, looking down upon them. وقبول الحق من الشريف والدنيء منهم. That's also could be a sign, and it's also a remedy. So one of the ways to do that is to accept the haqq, to accept the truth, whether you consider them to be noble, sharif, or dani, or you consider them to be not to be so noble, right? To accept advice and to accept counsel from someone, even if you think that they're less than you are. And if you think that they're less than you are, then you won't accept their advice or their counsel. But if you see that al-khalq aqlam al-haqq, if you are busy with al-azama, with the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the mushahada, then you see the words is not coming just from that person, but the one who put the words in his mouth or her mouth is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then why the rejection? Why the lack of acceptance? وإذا قيل له اتق الله أخذته العزة بالإثم فحسبه جهنم ولا بئس المهاد. And if it said to him اتق الله أخذته العزة بالإثم, right? If you're like, who are you? أنا عزيز وأنت دنيء وأنت ذليل. I am high and you are low. You don't have a right to speak to me. Are you sure who you're talking to? And that sort of thing. So to accept the haqq, to accept the truth, to accept that which is leading to guidance, whether you consider them to be sharif or dani. And that's one of the sifa of the Arifin, is they have this ability to listen to everything and not dismiss anything. They even listen to the birds and to the animals and to even the most subtle of things that we would dismiss. And some of them, they would go in a state of tarab, right, like a state of spiritual ecstasy because they heard a bird chirping. Not because the nightingale sounds so beautiful, though it might, but they see it as a manifestation, a tajalli of the names, the beautiful names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's someone who's mustaghriq fil azama wa fil mushahada, as he says here. So وضوع النفس مع الخلق في الحق في كفة واحدة. Put yourself and everybody else in the same scale in terms of the truth, in terms of the haqq, as everybody else. You are not superior to them, right? And whatever your self-assessment or self-evaluation of yourself is does not make it so. We will only know that, we will only know the ranks and the degrees and so forth in the akhirah, in the next life. But no one knows that in this life. وهي درجة يرقى العبد إليها عقبة صعب المرتقى. Right? So this is not an easy place to get to. It's a high degree that the servant seeks to overcome. It's an obstacle, but it is something that one should aspire to. لا تثبت عليها قدم. No one will have a secure footing in this. لمن لم تثبت عظمة الله وخشيته في قلبي. Except if you have the عظمة, so that is the jalal aspect, the magnificence of Allah, وخشيته, and the jamal aspect in one's heart. So if you have both عظمة and khashya, reverence and fear, and everything that is about your life is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's the one who can possibly find a secure footing in having that daraja and having that rank with people and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, صعب المرتقى, very difficult to achieve and very difficult to get to. So the next section, فصل ما يتفرع من الأدب مع الحق, that which is then addressing the adab with the haqq. So I'm going to save that for next time, because I see we have quite a bit of questions. So I'm going to do that right now, inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.